The night was cold on the alien planet of Urnix. Rain fell in slow, silent drops, like the sky itself was crying. In the shadows of a great city, down in the filth where no one looked, a small alien girl lay curled up in an alley, her thin arms wrapped around her legs, her eyes glowing faint blue with sadness and pain. She was dirty, shaking, and alone. No one cared for her. Not her family, not the city, not even her own kind. Her name was Kira. She had a limp leg, a strange eye that flickered with static, and a thin scar across her cheek. To her people, that meant she was broken, useless, a defect. And defects had no place in their clean, perfect world. Earlier that day, her parents had taken her to the outer zone and left her there without a word. She had reached for her mother's hand, but it had pulled away. The door slammed shut. Their ship flew off, leaving her in dust and silence. Now she cried in the dark, her voice low and full of hopelessness. No one would hear her. No one ever did, until a sound echoed in the alley. Footsteps, slow and careful. Kira held her breath, afraid. Usually footsteps meant trouble, boys throwing rocks, adults shouting insults. But this time, the footsteps stopped right in front of her. A voice followed, soft but clear. "Hey, are you okay?" Kira opened her eye, blinking through tears. A human stood there, tall, tired-looking, with a gentle face and a long coat soaked in rain. He knelt down, his boots pressing into the wet ground. "I won't hurt you," he said, holding up his hands. "I just saw you lying there." Kira didn't speak. She only stared at him with fear. The human reached into his coat and pulled out a small pack of food rations from his bag. He gently placed it near her feet. "You look hungry," he said. "Go on, take it." Still, Kira didn't move. She had been tricked before. She had been kicked, used, and laughed at. But the human didn't force her. He just sat beside her on the wet ground, silent and patient. "My name's Jaden," he finally said, looking at the dark sky. "I came here on a cargo ship, got stuck when it left without me." He smiled softly. "This planet's not very kind, is it?" Kira's voice was barely a whisper. "Why, are you talking to me?" Jaden turned his head to her, surprised but glad she spoke. "Because you're here," he said. "Because you're someone, not garbage." Kira looked down at her hands. "They say I am trash," she said. "Broken. No good." Jaden's smile faded. He looked at her leg, saw the damaged joint, the metal rods poking from her knee. He saw the fear in her eyes and the way she hugged herself like the world might attack again. "I don't see trash," he said slowly. "I see someone who's still breathing, still fighting to live." Kira felt something strange in her chest, like warmth, like light. She had never heard words like that before, not from anyone. She reached forward, her small fingers touching the food pack. She pulled it closer and opened it with shaking hands. Jaden smiled again. "There you go," he said. "Eat slowly." For the next few minutes, there was no sound but the quiet chewing of food and the rain tapping the ground. Jaden sat beside her like they were old friends, saying nothing more, just being there, above them, high. On a balcony, two alien boys laughed as they pointed. "Look at the human," one said. "Feeding the defect. Stupid human," the other replied. "He'll catch her disease." Jaden heard them, but he didn't react. He looked at Kira, who had heard too, her face now hiding behind her hands. He touched her shoulder gently. "Don't listen to them," he said. "They don't know who you really are." Kira looked up at him, her eyes wide. "No one has ever stayed," she said. "Why would you?" Jaden thought for a moment, then answered, "Because you shouldn't be alone." Kira stared at him, unsure if this was a dream. But the rain was real, the food was real, and the warmth in her chest was real too, and for the first time in her life, she whispered her name to someone. "Kira," Jaden smiled. "That's a good name." As the night grew darker and the rain slowed, Kira leaned gently against him. She was still afraid, still broken, but now she wasn't alone, and somewhere deep inside her something began to stir. The wind howled through the edges of the broken city, carrying dust, whispers, and judgment. Morning light barely touched the alley where Jaden had found her, but the girl named Kira was still there, wrapped in an old human coat too big for her. She sat beside the fire he had built from scraps, her eyes watching the dancing flames like they were telling stories only she could understand. Jaden returned from the nearby outpost with a bag of supplies, half of which he had to trade his last tools for. When he saw her still there, his face softened. He had expected her to be gone, like a bird too afraid to land. But she had stayed, and that meant something. Kira didn't speak at first, but she looked at him and gave the smallest nod. Jaden smiled and tossed her a wrapped protein cube, which she caught with slow fingers. Her hands were still shaky, like they hadn't known peace in years. Got lucky, Jaden said as he sat beside her again. Found an old vendor who still remembered how to be kind. Kira looked at the cube, then at him, her eyes blinking slowly. You gave away your tools, she said. Her voice soft and unsure. Jaden shrugged. They weren't fixing anything useful anymore. She stared at him, her mind fighting the question she was too scared to ask. Finally she said it. Why do you care? Jaden didn't answer right away. He leaned back, his eyes watching the smoke rise. I don't know, he said. Maybe I'm just tired of walking past things that are wrong and doing nothing. Kira lowered her head, gripping the cube tightly. In her old life, every kindness came with a trick. Every soft word led to pain. But this human, he was confusing. Their quiet moments shattered with the sound of laughter. 3 tall aliens stepped into the alley, their skin pale green, and their eyes full of mocking fire. Well, one of them sneered. What's this? A human raising trash? Jaden stood up, his body tense but calm. He moved in front of Kira without thinking. She pulled back in fear, hiding behind him as if it was the only shield she had. She's not trash, Jaden said firmly, his voice steady. The lead alien laughed. You're defending a defect human. That's pathetic. Jaden's hands tightened at his sides. He didn't want to fight, but he would if he had to. She didn't ask to be born this way, he said. She didn't ask to be left behind. The aliens took a step closer. You think she's one of us? They hissed. She's a mistake. You'll catch her disease. Jaden didn't move. She's more decent than all of you put together, he said. Now back off. The aliens exchanged glances, uncertain whether to laugh or attack, but something in Jaden's eyes made them pause. Not fear, not anger, just unshakable resolve. They turned away, spitting insults behind them as they vanished into the haze. Kira was shaking, not from the cold this time, but from something deeper. She looked at Jaden with wide eyes. You stood up for me, she whispered. You didn't even know me. Jaden crouched beside her again, offering his hand. Maybe I don't need to know everything to know what's right, he said. She stared at his hand for a long moment, then slowly placed her small fingers into his. That evening, they walked together to an old metal shack outside the city. Hidden among rusted towers and overgrown roots, it wasn't much, just a roof, 2 mats, and a small heater powered by solar scraps. But to Kira, it felt like a palace. Jaden showed her how to cook the food cubes using heat gel. He gave her the cleaner side of the mat to sleep on. She barely spoke, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, watching every move, like she was trying to understand something impossible. Before sleeping, she asked, Will you leave me too? Jaden turned toward her, surprised by the question. I don't plan to, he said. Not unless you ask me to. Silence stretched between them for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and whispered, Then I'll stay. Outside, the night deepened, and the city above continued its cruel life. But down in the shadows, a bond was forming. Quiet but strong. No one saw it coming, and no one would believe it mattered. But in time, it would change everything. The sky above Urnix cracked with thunder as storm winds rolled over the steel rooftops. Rain slammed against the ground like falling stones, drowning the city in noise. But inside the old shack beyond the wall, there was stillness. Kira sat beside The firelight, her hands pressed around a warm mug of broth. Her leg, now bandaged and supported by a metal brace, no longer hurt as much. She had started to sleep at night without jerking awake. Without crying, Jaden watched her from across the room. Smiling when she wasn't looking, he had cleaned up the place a bit. Added blankets, fixed the heater. It still smelled like rust and dust, but it was safe. And safety was something Kira hadn't known in a long time, but safety never lasted long on Urnix, especially for those the system had rejected. The first sign something was wrong came when Jaden returned late from the food station. His face was bruised, and his coat was torn. He dropped the small bag of supplies and said nothing at first. Kira rushed over to help him, panic in her voice. "Who did this? What happened?" Jaden wiped blood from his lip and sat down slowly. "They know where we are now," he said, his voice calm but tight. "Someone followed me, then tried to scare me off." Kira's eyes widened. "You should have left me," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't have to." Jaden cut her off with a quiet hand raised. "I'm not leaving you," he said. "That's not even a choice for me." Later that night, while she tried to sleep, Kira heard strange clicks outside the shack. She got up silently and looked through a crack in the wall. Two figures stood at the edge of the trees, dressed in armor with blinking visors. She backed away, fear rising like a storm inside her chest. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They came to take me." Jaden didn't ask how she knew. He simply grabbed his bag and began stuffing in supplies food. "Maps, tools, whatever they could carry. We're leaving," he said. "Right now." The forest beyond the city was dark, but Jaden knew the paths well. He had lived here long enough to learn where others didn't go. Kira followed close behind, limping but determined. They didn't speak, just moved through the mud and rain, guided by instinct and fear. Behind them, red lights moved through the trees, slow and hunting. At dawn, they reached a hidden ridge, covered in thick moss and forgotten machines. Jaden led her into a narrow passage inside an old wrecked drone carrier. It was silent, dusty, and full of cobwebs, but again safe. For now, Kira sat down, her breath heavy. Jaden knelt beside her, checking her brace. "They want you because of what's inside you," he said quietly. "Something they never told you about." Kira looked at her hands, trembling. "I'm just broken," she whispered. "That's all I've ever been." Jaden shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "You're not broken. You're hiding something powerful, even if you don't know it yet." She didn't answer, but her eyes no longer looked away. Hours passed before Jaden felt it was safe to rest. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and leaned against the cold wall. Outside, shadows moved again closer this time. Suddenly, a crashing sound broke the silence. The door to the wreck shook violently. Kira gasped and stepped back, frozen with fear. Jaden grabbed a tool rod and stood in front of her. "You'll have to go through me first," he said aloud. The door burst open, and a tall, armored alien stepped in. Gun raised, Kira screamed, her body flashing with panic. And then something strange happened. A pulse of light spread out from her body like a ripple. The alien froze. His helmet short-circuited. Sparks flying, he fell to his knees. Stunned and twitching, Jaden turned to Kira in disbelief. "That was you," he said, his voice full of shock. "You just disabled him." Kira stared at her hands, glowing faintly blue. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I don't know what I did." Jaden took a deep breath, then smiled. "Well, whatever it was, you just saved both of us." They dragged the stunned alien outside and ran again before more could come. As they crossed a small ravine, Kira looked up at the rising sun. She was tired, hurt, confused, but something had changed. She had defended someone, and in doing so, had defended herself too. That night, under a broken shelter of vines and stone, Kira asked softly, "Why do you still stay with me even now?" Jaden looked at her and answered without pause, "Because you're not what they say you are." She turned away, but for the first time, a tiny smile touched her lips. He believed in her, and now, maybe, she could start believing too. Asterisk, the sky had turned orange when they found shelter in the cracked remains of an old power relay tower. Nature had taken over the place. Vines crawled across the steel walls, and strange glowing plants lit up the corners like forgotten lanterns. Jaden checked the perimeter while Kira sat near a pile of dried leaves. Watching her trembling fingers, her hands had glowed again, just like before, and that pulse from her chest, that strange energy, had knocked the armored alien down like a falling statue. She didn't understand it, but one thing was clear now: whatever was inside her wasn't dead. Jaden crouched beside her with a handful of berries he had scanned for toxins. She took one and chewed slowly, not because she was hungry, but because it helped her forget what had happened. "You doing okay?" Jaden asked, his voice soft. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, "What if I really am dangerous?" Jaden looked at her, his expression calm. "I've been around dangerous things," he said. "You're not one of them." Kira shook her head. "I didn't mean to hurt that alien," she whispered, "but my body just reacted." Jaden leaned back, hands behind his head. "Maybe it's your defense system," he said. "Maybe it's something deeper, something your people tried to bury." Kira lowered her eyes. "Then why would they throw me away if I had something special?" Jaden didn't speak for a moment, then said, "Because they were afraid." The quiet was broken by a strange howl in the distance, sharp and echoing. Jaden jumped to his feet and grabbed the nearest rod. "That's not patrol," he said. "That's something wild." Kira stood too, her leg brace clicking with each step. She peered through the rusted wall slats and froze. Something was moving through the jungle, big and fast, too many legs, too many teeth. A forest predator, massive. Blind, but guided by vibration, it sniffed the air, then suddenly snapped its head toward their shelter. Jaden shoved Kira behind him and held up the rod. It looked like a toy against that monster. The beast charged, its claws ripping the ground. Jaden braced for death. Kira screamed. But it wasn't just fear this time, it was different. A high-pitched sound burst from her throat, louder and sharper than before. It hit the creature mid-leap, like an invisible blade. The beast shrieked and twisted in the air, crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. The jungle fell silent. Even the plants seemed to stop glowing for a second. Jaden turned slowly, looking at Kira with wide eyes. She was on the ground, breathing hard, her body glowing faintly along her arms and neck. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Kira blinked, dazed. "I didn't know I could do that," she whispered. "I just wanted it to stop." Jaden checked her pulse. It was fast but strong. "That scream." "It wasn't just noise," he said. "It was some kind of sonic attack." Kira looked scared. "I don't want to hurt people," she said quickly. "I don't want to be a weapon." Jaden shook his head. "You're not a weapon," he said. "You're a survivor, and you just saved my life." Later that night, after they had dragged the beast's body deeper into the jungle to avoid attracting more predators, Jaden tried using his scanner on Kira's DNA sample. It flickered, then shut down entirely. Even his tech couldn't read her structure anymore. "You're not normal," he said with a small laugh, sitting by the fire again. "You might be one of the old project's biotech hybrids, grown to interface with alien tech, maybe even war machines." Kira pulled her knees to her chest, staring into the flames. "I don't want to be what they made me," she said. Jaden tossed another branch into the fire. "Then don't," he said. "Be what you choose to be." The fire crackled between them as stars blinked above through holes in the tower ceiling. Kira looked up at the night sky, thinking about all the people who called her useless, all the ones who turned their backs when she cried for help. Now she had saved someone, not just anyone, but the only person who had ever stayed. A small smile touched her lips, so faint it almost didn't exist. "I didn't die," she whispered. "I made something die to protect someone else." Jaden nodded. "That's called being alive," he said. "And it means you matter." A breeze passed through the tower, stirring the vines and leaves. Somewhere deep in the city, alarms were starting to beep. Her pulse had been felt by others, by systems watching from orbit. But for now, in this moment, Kira was no longer just broken. She was something new, something dangerous, something alive, and someone, far above, was watching her signal with fear in their eyes. A new hologram flickered across every screen in the outer districts. Jaden's face, tired but determined, appeared with bold red letters flashing underneath. Wanted for harboring a dangerous asset. Bounty, 25,000 credits alive, 15,000. Dead, Kira watched from inside her rusted shelter, her hands shaking as she read the words over and over again. They weren't hunting her anymore. They were hunting him because he stayed, because he protected her, because he didn't run. Jaden entered moments later, soaked in rain, his eyes locking on the screen. He didn't even flinch. Figured it would happen sooner or later, he said, pulling off his jacket. Kira stood, her voice cracking. They put a price on your life because of me. He gave her a quick look. Serious but calm. No, he replied. They put a price on my life because I refused to treat you like cargo. Outside, storm sirens echoed through the jungle. Patrol drones buzzed low, scanning every cave, every rooftop. Jaden knew this part of the forest wouldn't stay safe for long. They had to move again. He checked the map on his cracked pad, tracing their next path with his finger. There's an old resistance tunnel a few clicks north, he said. Might still be usable. Kira nodded, though fear squeezed her chest tighter with every breath. They left the shelter under cover of thick fog, slipping between roots and rocks. Every sound in the jungle made Kira jump, branches snapping, creatures rustling, distant mechanical hums. Jaden kept close, always a step ahead, always watching. The shadows halfway to the tunnel, a hoverbike roared overhead, scanning beams sweeping across the trees. Jaden pushed Kira down into a muddy ditch and covered her with his coat. They held their breath as light passed over them. The drone moved on without noticing. Kira looked up at him when the danger passed, her voice a whisper. You could have left me and escaped days ago. Jaden didn't answer at first. Then he whispered back. Leaving you never felt right, and surviving without meaning isn't living. They reached the entrance to the tunnel just as the sun dipped below the ridge. A wide steel hatch blocked the way. Rusted and buried in vines, Jaden knelt beside it and began working the control panel, his fingers fast and practiced. But the door didn't open. Kira stepped closer, something in her chest pulling her forward. Her hand touched the cold metal, and it responded. A soft hum echoed. Then the hatch creaked and groaned open like it had been waiting for her. Jaden raised an eyebrow. Okay, that's definitely not normal. Inside, the tunnel was dark and damp, filled with old resistance gear and empty crates. Jaden found a flashlight and checked the power levels. Kira sat down against the wall, suddenly dizzy. Her body had started glowing again, but only faintly. You all right? Jaden asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. Kira nodded slowly. I don't know why that keeps happening, she said. I don't even know what I am anymore. Jaden smiled gently. You're Kira, he said. And that's all that matters to me. A noise echoed from above, metal clanging, boots landing, voices shouting. The bounty hunters had tracked them faster than expected. Jaden jumped to his feet, grabbing an old stun rifle from a wall rack. He tossed Kira a small control pad. If anything happens to me, keep going, he said. Kira clutched it tight, her eyes wide. No, she whispered. I'm not leaving you behind. Jaden looked into her glowing eyes, and for the first time, he didn't see a lost girl. He saw someone ready to stand, even if her legs shook. Someone who had nothing yet still chose to protect the bounty. Hunters burst into the tunnel with blinding lights and echoing shouts. Jaden fired a warning shot that lit up the walls. Turn her in, and we'll let you live. One of them shouted, Last chance. Jaden didn't back down. Not happening, he called out. She's not property. Suddenly, The tunnel pulsed with energy. Kira was standing now, arms raised, eyes glowing bright. The hunters laughed. At first, until their lights flickered and their weapons jammed. Sparks flew from every machine they carried, as if something was eating the tech from the inside. Kira screamed, not loud, but sharp and focused. The wave hit like thunder, knocking the men off their feet, slamming them against the tunnel walls. When silence returned, the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Jaden looked around in disbelief. "You just fried their whole squad." Kira fell to her knees, exhausted. "I didn't mean to do all that," she said softly. "But I won't let them take you." Jaden helped her up, one arm around her shoulder. They walked deeper into the tunnel. Together, each step echoing off the old stone. The system had marked him as a fugitive, a traitor, a fool. But to Kira, he was more than that. He was the only one who stayed. And now she would stay for him too. The wind was silent inside the mountain tunnel. But Kira's heart pounded like war drums. Her steps were slow, careful. But there was no fear in her movements anymore. Not like before, not like when she first met Jaden. Now she wasn't running. She was walking out to face them, at the tunnel's end. The jungle cracked apart as a dark ship landed. Engines hissed, steam rushed through the trees, and armored boots hit the ground one by one. 6 elite hunters stood tall, masked, cold, and wordless. Behind them was a commander taller than the rest, skin like silver glass and voice sharp as a blade. "Bring the girl forward," he said. "The human can stay if he kneels." Jaden gritted his teeth, stepping between them and Kira again. "I don't kneel," he said, "and she's not going with you." The commander laughed without humor. "She's not yours to protect," he said. "She belongs to us, by design." Kira stepped forward before Jaden could answer. Her glowing eyes met the commander's, and her voice was calm. "You didn't want me when I was weak," she said, "so you can't have me now that I'm strong." For a moment, even the birds fell silent. The hunters raised their weapons. But the commander raised a hand to stop them. "You think glowing lights make you powerful?" he said. "You were a failed experiment, a broken shell, discarded because you lacked control." Kira didn't flinch. "I didn't lack control," she said. "I lacked someone who believed I mattered." Jaden stood beside her now, proud. Silent. They didn't hold weapons, but they didn't need them. The commander's eyes narrowed. "You are property," he said sharply. "You were built to obey." Kira took one step closer. "I wasn't built," she replied. "I was born, I cried, I bled, and I survived." He raised his hand again. This time in signal, the hunters moved forward fast, aiming their shock cannons. Jaden reached for a pipe beside his foot, ready to fight even if it meant death. But then everything changed. The ground trembled, not from the ship, but from Kira. She raised her hands slowly, her fingers glowing with thin lines of light. A quiet hum escaped her lips, like a whisper only machines could hear. The hunters froze mid-step, weapons sparking, visors glitching. One by one, their systems collapsed. Helmets dropped, knees buckled, sparks danced through their suits. Within seconds, they were on the ground, breathing but unconscious. The commander stared at her. Now unsure, Kira stepped forward alone, her shadow long in the sunlight. "You didn't see me when I was starving in the alley," she said. "You didn't see me when I cried in the dark." He stepped back, unsure whether to run or fight. "But he did," she continued, nodding toward Jaden. "He saw me as a person. And that's something you'll never understand." The commander hissed, pulling a sleek weapon from his side. "I made you," he snarled, "and I can end you." Kira raised one glowing hand, and without touching him, the weapon in his grip shattered into dust. The blast of invisible force knocked him backward into the trees. Groaning in shock, Jaden ran to her side, panting from the rush. "You good?" he asked, his voice breathless but smiling. Kira nodded, her energy fading but her mind clearer than ever. "I didn't want to fight," she said, "but I won't let them take what I've become." They left the broken battlefield behind. Stepping over metal and wires, Kira didn't look back. Neither did Jaden. Word spread fast across Yurnix. A girl once called defective had stood up to the system and won. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into hope. In the lower cities, children like Kira, those rejected for being too slow, too strange, or too different, looked at the stars that night and wondered if they too could be something more. And deep in an old corner of the world, Kira sat beside Jaden under the light of a broken moon. He handed her a warm mug, and she smiled, not because the battle was over, but because for the first time, her life was truly her own. She was no longer a burden, no longer a name on a bounty screen. She had taken her stand, and the galaxy had finally heard her voice. The sky was different now, not just for Kira, but for the entire planet of Yurnix. Where once the stars seemed cold and unreachable, they now shone brighter, as if watching, waiting, whispering her name in the highest chamber of the galactic hall, a place she once believed she'd never even see. Kira stood before a gathering of alien leaders and human envoys. Her cloak, once rags and wires, now flowed like silver light across her shoulders, but even now, her brace clicked faintly with every step, a soft reminder of the girl they once called broken. She didn't want the spotlight. She never dreamed of standing here, but she had survived the dark, and sometimes, survival is the loudest voice in the room. Jaden sat quietly on the edge of the crowd, dressed simply, like always. He didn't wave or speak, but their eyes met across the hall, and that was enough. A tall alien with golden skin and a voice like music cleared her throat. "You were once left for dead," she said to Kira. "Now the council offers you a seat among those who decide the future." Kira said nothing for a moment. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that once shook in fear, the same hands that burned through armored hunters. She clenched them gently, not out of anger but focus. "I don't want a throne," she said calmly. "I want protection for the one still sleeping on cold stone." Murmurs swept the room. One elder leaned forward. "And what would you ask of us?" Kira looked up, her voice firm but soft. "I want no more children discarded like parts, no more labels for those who heal slower or shine differently. I want every broken piece given a chance to fit somewhere." The room fell quiet. "No." One laughed. No one mocked her voice, her limp, or her glowing eyes. Jaden smiled. And though he said nothing, his eyes said everything. He remembered the alley, the fear, the first food cube, and now here she was, changing the shape of power without even lifting a weapon. Kira finished her words and walked away from the council table. They clapped for her, but she didn't care about applause. Her heart was already full, outside, where the sky stretched wide and blue. Kira stood on the balcony and breathed in deep. The air didn't smell like fear anymore. Jaden joined her moments later, carrying 2 small warm drinks. "Didn't trip." "Once," he joked gently, handing her the mug. She chuckled. "The sound still rare but warm. I practiced walking while you were asleep," she said. "Didn't want to embarrass you in front of your fancy council friends." He leaned on the railing beside her, watching distant ships fly past. "You know you could stay here," he said. "You'd have guards, comfort, maybe even your own team." Kira looked up at the sky again, then at her reflection in the polished glass. "I don't want to stay here," she said. "I want to go back to where they still leave others like me behind." Jaden nodded slowly. "You're really gonna do it, huh?" he said. "You're going to save the ones no one wants to see." Kira didn't answer. She didn't need to. Weeks later, word began to spread through the outer zones. A small vessel had landed in forgotten places, slums, ruins, junk worlds. And from that vessel stepped a girl with glowing eyes and a calm voice. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't order soldiers. She simply listened, held small hands, repaired broken limbs, and told stories of a human who once shared his last food pack with a girl everyone had called trash. The people listened, then they stood, then they believed, and as the seasons passed, that belief turned into something stronger, a movement, a future, a promise. Kira never asked for thanks. But she always returned to one place, the quiet forest. Shack beyond the edge of the city, Jaden still lived there, still growing strange fruit and building things from scraps. One evening, she stood at the doorway, watching him work. He looked up and smiled. "Took you long enough," he said, brushing dust from his hands. She walked in and sat beside him like she had done so long ago. The same brace still wrapped her leg, but now it didn't slow her down, it made her stronger. "I told the council I'd visit once a year," she said. "They think I'm resting." Jaden laughed softly. "You?" he said, "resting?" "Never." She smiled and leaned back against the old wall. The stars blinked above them, steady and kind. Once she had been thrown away like garbage. Now she was the reason others had hope. And in a galaxy full of noise, one truth remained. The girl they all rejected had never needed to be fixed. She had only needed someone to believe she was worth saving.